Hello and welcome to Data Planet. Our guest today is Evelynn Moon, Director of Learning and Content Strategy at Good Grief, and I'm your host, Emma Davis. Welcome to the show, Evelynn.
Hi, Emma. Thanks for having me.
Super happy to have you here. To start out, could you tell me a bit about Good Grief's mission? So where did you start as an organization and what is your focus now?
Yeah, so we started in the early 2000s. We're a little over 20 years old, based in New Jersey, where we have two physical centers where we provide completely free and unlimited grief support services to grieving children and families. It really came out of that time period after September 11th. There was so many northern New Jersey families that needed support. We started in a church and grew from there to our two locations that we have now. But over the years, we have grown so much to supporting schools, private companies, other nonprofits, hospitals, healthcare, even funeral homes. I feel like we've really expanded into the education field, so creating a more grief-informed and grief-sensitive world wherever we can.
And is that typically the work that you're doing in response to a loss, in response to something, or when you're working with an organization, is it a little more of a, here's some preparation and some training because, the things happen that cause grief for people?
Some of my favorite partners are the proactive partners, but unfortunately, many times people find their way to us because something has happened. I feel many times, especially school partners, they're Googling grief schools, New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
and we pop up. I think our website does a lot of heavy lifting for us in communicating and conveying our mission and our services. So people can sort of suss out pretty easily whether or not we're a good fit for what they need. New
Mm-hmm.
Jersey's very fortunate that in the school space, we have the Traumatic Loss Coalition, which is really for that immediate period after unexpected and traumatic loss in a school community. We're
Mm-hmm.
really there for the bigger picture, the long term, removing the stigma, changing the conversation around grief and loss, which is a universal experience, but not something we all love talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Universal, but mostly out of our awareness, right? Unless we're
Yeah,
experiencing it ourselves or we see someone we care about dealing with it and we realize I'm at a total loss for what to do to help support them.
absolutely.
Um, so as a nonprofit, you have some limited resources to work with. You're not like a venture funded, just sort of throwing cash left, right, and center. So, um, how do you decide where to allocate limited resources when everything feels mission critical? You're so focused on helping individual people, and there are so many people who need help. So, like, how do you balance those things to help the health of the organization, but also stay focused on your mission?
It's something that you have to be very intentional about. Mission creep, especially in the nonprofit space, is a very real experience. You see a grant that sort of is close to what you do, and maybe you could make some adjustments. Maybe you could build out a program. And next thing you know, you're going down a path that you didn't intend. I think what is really important with nonprofits is keeping the mission as your North Star. We spent a long time recently doing a 10-year strategic plan, and I think that's really anchored us because we were able to work backwards. Where do we want to be in a decade? What do we have to do in 5 years to get there? 3 years, 1 year? So when things come to us, we can look at it and say, is this helping us achieve our near-term goals that are going to lead us to the long-term goals? And if the answer is no, who else can we connect them to? Because we also see ourselves as a connector in the grief space. Unfortunately, there is so much grief to go around, and we're never at a lack for opportunities to get involved and support. But with our limited resources, we have to be very clear about what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine that's true as an organization, but also as individuals, like, trying to give of yourself to help others, you can overdo that. And so do you similarly for the individuals working in the organization or actually running some of the programs and, face to face with people experiencing that grief? Um, I imagine you have, vision and limitations in place on that as well to just make sure that everybody's safe and healthy.
Absolutely. So we have a large group of volunteers that help us do the work that we do. They interact directly with families. Our staff interacts with families. even in our training and school space, people are sharing about their grief. You're carrying stories home with you. So we're very careful about how much we allow people to do. We don't want people doing 4 grief groups in a week. That's a lot to carry. When we're training schools to run grief groups, we recommend that they only do one at a time because you need to be able to maintain and sustain that water line. You know, they say you can't pour from an empty cup. Just keep it topped up as much as you can. So we're very big on self-care, whether that is taking time for yourself, going to therapy. We also do something called debriefing with our staff and with our volunteers, where we intentionally set aside time to talk about things that are either happening within the context of good grief, but also in our personal lives, because we carry that too. Most people don't trip, fall, and land in the grief space. There's
Yeah.
usually a reason. So there's stories and experience and history with grief. So we want to make sure that people are as whole as possible so that way they can sustain themselves in this work.
Yeah, absolutely. And so talking about, sustainability, um, how are you thinking about you mentioned your 10-year plan. How are you thinking about the future of the program and, continuing to grow if profit isn't the goal?
Right. Even though we're a nonprofit, I think a lot of people think that nonprofits mean no profit. There is some financial sustainability that I think all nonprofits are trying to reach. Our long term goal, because we can't open centers everywhere in the world, that would be amazing. But having these physical locations is a big resource drain. There's a lot of financial considerations for things like that. So, part of our mission to build resilience, make a more grief informed world is through education. So, our external training, our hope is that as we partner with more national organizations, international organizations, school systems, we're able to generate enough revenue to sustain the work in our family centers. So that way we're not necessarily fundraising for our lives every
Yeah.
year, nail
Yeah.
biting at the in December about what checks are going to come in. We'll always need our family foundations, individual supporters, the grantors, all of that is so important, but being able to diversify through education, I think is what's really going to, I mean, not only give us stability, but amplify our impact.
Yeah.
By working with the adults who are then interacting with young people, we can change their experience of grief in the school spaces or community spaces that they're in.
Yeah. And I imagine being able to do that predictably then just gives you so much more freedom to see where can we maximize our impact as opposed to planning in more sort of short-term spurts based on, okay, well, we had a decent donation month or quarter or whatever, and so I guess we can do this now and a little more, going back to the 10-year plan, like, okay, how do we get to that 10-year out mark?
Yeah, getting your head above the water a little bit and being able to look around. And when you're not as concerned about finances, having things like an endowment, like some nonprofits have, you can do more of the work that is close to the heart of the mission, even if it's not always the most profitable, but the most impactful. So it does free you up in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. So on the fundraising front, you talked about this sort of divergence of revenue streams or efforts. So there's fundraising and events, and then there's this, sustainable revenue model,
Hmm.
the partnerships and education route. Um, on the fundraising side, what tells you that a specific effort or outreach channel is working and is working to the degree that you need it to in terms of the investment it takes to play in that channel or to hold that event and then what you're getting back.
I think for us, the clearest signal is when it starts to build momentum and connect in other ways. And then that impact kind of compounds. Because if the story is resonating with an individual, our mission, maybe they're going to volunteer. Maybe they'll have a 5K team. Maybe they'll get their company to buy a table at the gala. And it starts to sort of spread that way. So they buy the table at the gala Then we're connecting with other people in the company. Maybe we come in and then do a presentation. Maybe we do some education through human resources. So it's all sort of carried forward by our community. Our volunteers do the same thing. They're connecting their workplaces, their friends, their family. Our participants are bringing their networks to our annual 5Ks that we do for fundraising. And it's a big event for our community to come together and sort of share that experience.
Mhm.
And that is really the goal. Once we're able to do that and maintain those relationships, that's when you know that it's working. When outreach starts to feel transactional, that's a warning sign. It should feel like a relationship. We want people to feel connected to the organization in the ways that make sense for them.
Mhm. And does that come from a practical place, or does that come from, again, the mission at the heart of the organization place?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. We did hire someone who is stewarding our individual donors. And I think that's really important because even if they're just giving a little bit every month, that's something that we can plan on. And it again, it compounds and the interest and the predictability and the reliability. What do we have to do to make sure that they don't suddenly feel disconnected from us or like they don't know what's going on. So I think in some ways it's very practical. It's sort of now built into the institution that is Good Grief through this role. But it's also the heart. We are, of course, informed by the data, by all of the evaluations and everything that we do, but we are informed in our work by the quality of the relationships and the impact that it has on our people. Ideally, we want all of our participants to eventually move on, which is
Yes.
sort of a weird
Yeah.
model. It's very bittersweet, but when families are able to feel like they've gotten everything that they need, that's when we know that we've been successful with them. And sometimes they then come back and volunteer.
Yeah.
Or, we've had people write us into their estate with their wills, or, they want to give back in some way because it was impactful for them.
It's really beautiful. I can imagine it being another form of healing to
Mm,
then support others going through something that you yourself may have experienced. So, um, it is really cool the parallel ways that that works. Like, yeah, that building those relationships with donors and sort of those networks, it helps sustain the program, but also in and of itself is a way to continue helping people to heal and helping those individuals who then have a chance to participate. They're getting more of an education, if for future planning or for, oh, turns out I know somebody who might be going through this right now and now I can support them better. And it's sort of a I don't want to say self-sustaining because I know that
mm.
a lot of work goes into that, but it's really beautiful the way that that operates on multiple levels.
Yeah, I think folks want to reach a hand back. Some of our biggest supporters are probably folks who would have needed an organization like ours when they were younger, but it didn't exist.
Mm,
So I think they want to ensure that no child is going through this experience alone. And the state of New Jersey has actually recognized that these skills are important. So they have now made grief education mandatory for grades 8 through 12. They're currently writing the standards. So I believe beginning next September, our older students will begin receiving some instruction on how to support themselves, how to support others, and just normalize the experience.
that's amazing. Like as part of a health class or yeah.
Yeah. A lot of social and emotional and mental wellness lives under the banner of health and PE.
Mhm. Awesome. That's amazing. Um, how granular are you getting with planning out, we're going to invest in this thing and here's how we're going to know if that's working. Here's our goal for that investment versus, well, let's try this. This seems like a good idea and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Sometimes there's things that people feel really passionate about. So that's a tough but a very important question. And I think whenever we're increasing our spending or even staff time, because staff time could be used in a lot of different ways, we have to have a way of evaluating if it's doing what we hope it's going to do. So what are the outcomes that we're measuring? Over what time frame? What does success look like? These are conversations that you have to have. Um, we were pairing with a school that kept saying, we have a community, people will come at night, we could become a satellite location. We tried it, 2 families came.
Mhm.
So, I mean, yes, for those 2 families, it was probably really impactful, but you have to know when to adjust, when to try something else, or when you're going to just press the eject button.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, sometimes you do have to spend money to make money, like the new role that we added for stewarding our individual donors. That over time will build us up financially, but also our connectivity with our community. But
Absolutely.
you can't be blind about it. You have to have checkpoints and you have to have they're hard conversations because sometimes these are projects that people feel really passionate about, but where is the point where we say, this is not working, we could redirect our efforts towards something else?
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you, Evelyn, so much for being our very first nonprofit guest on Data
Hey.
Planet. I've loved learning about your organization and just talking about the sort of analytics and financial side of supporting a mission through a nonprofit. So I appreciate you coming on and talking with me about that. Um, Listeners, if you want to find out more about Evelyn and Good Grief, details are in the show notes. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us on Data Planet, Evelyn.
Thank you so much, Emma.